Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Movie Micah. Today, we will be going over my favorite film of each year that I have been alive. So tracing back to 2006, I'm going to give you my favorite film of each year. Before we get started, definitely share your picks down below in the comment section. What's your favorite movie from each year? But without further ado, let's get into the video. My honorable mentions for 2006 are Cars and Rocky Balboa, but my pick for 2006 is The Prestige. This has been one of my favorite movies of all time ever since I first saw it. It was completely mind-blowing the first time, and I continue to enjoy it every time. Some people figure it might not be as good on rewatch, but this is actually one of my favorite movies to revisit because you get to see how much effort he put into this to the point where the twist is hiding in plain sight, and I definitely don't want to spoil it. This twist was just so mind-blowing. This movie's pretty dark. There's not really anyone to root for, but for whatever reason, I just always enjoyed this movie. Honorable mentions for 2007 would have to be Spider-Man 3 and Ratatouille, but my pick for 2007 would have to be The Simpsons movie. Now, this is actually just a fun film. The Simpsons, one of my favorite animated shows, but The Simpsons is really funny. And this was a good way to bring it into a movie. It's a nice, larger story than most of the episodes. And it has the spirit of The Simpsons back when the show was actually really good, unlike the new seasons. But anyway, it's really enjoyable. Now, I don't think 2007 is all that great of a year, but The Simpsons movie is really fun. My honorable mentions for 2008 are Iron Man and WALL-E, but of course my pick for 2008 is The Dark Knight. Let's be honest, all of our picks for 2008 are The Dark Knight. There's barely anyone in the world that doesn't think this movie is great. I've said it's overrated for a very long time. I was very underwhelmed the first time I saw it and pretty disappointed. I expected something so much more epic. But now I really do appreciate this film. It does so many things very well. But by far my favorite thing about this movie is Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker, one of the best villains ever seen in a comic book movie. This movie is very good. It is the best in the trilogy, I have to admit. While I do still find it a tad bit overrated, I can't deny it is the best movie of 2008. So I only have one honorable mention for 2009, and that is Star Trek 2009. But my favorite movie from this year was Up. This is one of my favorite Pixar movies. It is probably the most emotional one. The first 10-minute segment is amazing, and the end scrapbook scene. Those two things are some of the best scenes in all of Pixar. I love this movie. It is definitely one of my favorite Pixar films. It's super entertaining, it's emotional when it needs to be, but it also has a lot of humor. It's an amazing movie. Honorable mentions for 2010 are Toy Story 3 and How to Train Your Dragon, but my favorite film of 2010 is my favorite movie of all time. Inception is such a masterpiece. Every time I rewatch it, I like it even more than I used to. The first couple times I saw it, I didn't quite understand the story, but now that I do, it's just better than I ever thought it could be. These characters are surprisingly great, but really, the visuals are by far the best I've ever seen. All the visuals of dream worlds and bending cities are phenomenal. The concept of this movie is naturally something that I would want to explore more of, just learning about how these dream worlds work. It's incredibly interesting. I always love watching Inception. And if you're not sure you really loved it your first time, I completely recommend giving it a bunch of rewatches because it just gets better every time. Honorable mentions for 2011 are Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 and The Muppets, but my pick for 2011 has gotta be Captain America: The First Avenger. Honestly, I think this might be the most underappreciated MCU movie. It doesn't get as much attention as I think it should. It's honestly on the level of the rest of the Captain America trilogy, my favorite comic book movie trilogy of all time. I think all three of these movies are fantastic. He's my favorite MCU character. This movie introduced him in a perfect way. I really enjoy every part of this movie. And when people complain that it montages through World War II, I honestly don't get bothered by that very much. Honorable mentions for 2012 are The Dark Knight Rises and The Hunger Games, but my favorite movie of that year was The Avengers. I tried to avoid having 2 years in a row be MCU movies, but this is just my honest opinion, and this is how it turned out, because these are both some of my personal favorites. But it's crazy to think with the Avengers, you had to merge all these different franchises, and it had never really been done before. And all these different heroes act so differently, their movies feel so different, but Joss Whedon combined them all basically perfectly. Loki is such an amazing villain in this film. The Avengers gave us a great conclusion to Phase 1, while also setting up a lot to come later in the MCU. My one honorable mention for 2013 was Oblivion, and my favorite film of this year was Star Trek Into Darkness. This is actually surprisingly my favorite Star Trek film. It has slowly inched up my list. And yeah, call me a fake Star Trek fan. Apparently this does something that messes up Star Trek. I don't even know what that is, and I don't want to find out to ruin my experience watching this movie. Right now, this is my favorite Star Trek film. While I do think 2013 is a pretty bad year for movies overall, I really enjoy Star Trek Into Darkness. I think this movie has some really great character development. Yes, I know some flaws. There's one little thing here that really bothered me the first time, but now it's just a really action-packed, great movie with amazing performances. I can't hold back from saying this is my favorite Star Trek movie as of now. Alright, now before we head into 2014, this is just an amazing year for film, so if one of your personal favorites isn't even in my honorable mentions, sorry, there's nothing I can do about it. This was just an amazing year. So my honorable mentions for 2014 are Interstellar and Whiplash. But my favorite film from this year was Captain America: The Winter Soldier. As I said, I love the entire Captain America trilogy, but this one is the best of the three. I think this movie has moved up my MCU ranking quite a bit. It has gotten all the way up to my runner-up in the MCU. It is such a fantastic spy movie. I didn't used to think it was one of the best ones, but it certainly is. This is one of the more sophisticated plots in the MCU. It's so interesting to think about. All the villains, there's a lot of villains in this movie, and they're all very interesting. Bringing Bucky back was amazing, and all the stuff they do with Captain America's friendship with Bucky, it's really good, and this is one of the more underappreciated final battles. And this might have the best action in the MCU overall, so it goes without saying, this is a fantastic movie. Honorable mentions for 2015 were Inside Out and Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation, but my favorite film from that year was Creed. This was a really great way to bring back the Rocky franchise. Rocky Balboa, of course, was a great ending, but this was the only way the franchise could have continued, and it did it in an amazing way. I think handing over the franchise to Apollo Creed's son was probably the perfect direction for the franchise to go. I just appreciate all the performances in this movie. I would even say Sylvester Stallone's best performance in the franchise is here in this movie. While I actually do prefer Creed 2 to this one, this is still fantastic. Honorable mentions for 2016 are Captain America: Civil War and Rogue One, but my favorite film of 2016 was La La Land. I pretty much hate romantic musicals. I hate the concept of them. I never like any of those films, but La La Land just turned the genre completely on its head. I expected to hate this movie just like any other romantic musical, but man, this movie subverts your expectations in the best way possible. In a movie titled La La Land doesn't exist. That is awesome. That is why I love this movie. It's amazing. Honorable mentions for 2017 are Logan and Thor Ragnarok, but my favorite film of that year is War for the Planet of the Apes. This is by far my favorite in the new Planet of the Apes trilogy. It went a lot deeper in emotion than I ever thought it would. This movie's pretty dark, it's serious. It's probably not as enjoyable as the other Planet of the Apes movies, but I can definitely appreciate it the most. Just what they were going for here. You get to love all these characters even more and see their character arcs come to a close, and apparently it leads into the older Planet of the Apes movies, which I do need to check out. But yeah, this is just a really great film. Honorable mentions for 2018 are Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Mission Impossible Fallout. My favorite film of this year is Avengers Infinity War. This was the first part in the epic conclusion to the Infinity Saga, and bringing the Guardians of the Galaxy together with the Avengers was really awesome to see. This has some of my favorite action in the MCU, some of the best battle scenes. Thanos in this movie is by far the standout, as he is basically the main character. We see that he sort of has some truth behind what he's saying, but he's also really evil. He thinks he's the hero in this story. I also think the ending of Infinity War, when the Avengers don't actually win, was really risky, but it paid off very well, and it led into Endgame pretty much perfectly. Honorable mentions for 2019 are 1917 and Knives Out, but my favorite film of that year is, of course, Avengers Endgame. This used to be my favorite movie of all time for a very long time, for over a year. Of course, that has been taken by Inception, but I still love Avengers Endgame a lot, and it is still by far the best experience I've ever had watching a movie. A lot of people complain that this movie isn't good by itself, but that's not what it was trying to accomplish. This is a conclusion done right, and I think we need to be thankful for that. And there's a lot of people that just love to nitpick this movie. There are a lot less people, I feel like, now that appreciate this movie the way that I do. Endgame did something truly special. There's just so much fan service for longtime Marvel fans, and yeah, Endgame is really a movie like no other. And we have made it to 2020, so my honorable mentions are Candace Against the Universe and Onward, but my favorite film of this year, yes, it is Tenet, another Christopher Nolan movie on this list. I mean, Tenet, the first time I saw it, I thought it was very confusing and for no reason. On rewatch, it seems like it's a really basic story that he just didn't explain. I went into it thinking that I needed to think a lot, but really, it's one of his more straightforward stories, actually, which has really surprised me on second viewing. But aside from it being confusing the first time around, it is such a really cool film. The concept is so interesting to learn about. While 2020 hasn't had a ton of fantastic movies, Tenet is amazing. If you didn't like it the first time, this is the same thing I said for Inception. If you didn't think you loved it the first time, it absolutely deserves a rewatch, because you just understand more things, and it's way better. So yeah, that was my favorite film of every year that I have been alive. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to click that like button and subscribe up here so you don't miss out on any more of my future movie content that I might upload. I might be ranking every year of the 2010s based on their films. Make sure you're subscribed. You won't want to miss that. Also, you can check out some of my other videos right up here. Thanks for watching. This is Movie Micah signing off, and I'll see you next time.